Okay, so other than my introduction, this is the first lecture based on the required content for this course. This course is Early American History, also known as History 108. And we are going to begin this course by talking about the Americas before the colonial period. And, we're living, and most of us, here we are, we're in the United States of America. I'm speaking to you using the English language. If you look at North America, Central America, and South America, people speak either English or Spanish or Portuguese, which they speak in Brazil, or they speak French in Eastern Canada. Those are all European languages. The people who were living in what today we call the Americas didn't speak those languages. They had their own cultures. And we're going to take a look at what some of those groups were like and what they built and what they accomplished. There is diversity there. It's very interesting, personally, I think, when you're looking at pre-Columbian or pre-European America. And so we're gonna take a closer look at that. This is one of those areas where historians depend a lot on the work of archaeologists. And what you also have to understand is that if you are dealing with prehistoric cultures and people, there are simply a lot of things that we just don't know. Interestingly enough, I have a guy working outside my house. I'm having a new front walkway installed, and the guy doing the work is a brick mason. And I was having a conversation with a guy about the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire, which existed in the Andes Mountains along the west coast of South America. I mean, these people were some of the best, did some of the best masonry ever in the world. I mean, you have buildings and walls that were built by the Inca and centuries and centuries ago, and they're still just perfect. And to this day, nobody knows exactly how they did it. In the mountains of Peru, there is a city called Machu Picchu, and I'll talk more about that in my next lecture. And it's magnificent. And they built the city, high up in the Andes Mountains. And to this day, nobody really knows exactly how they did it, based on whatever their technology was at the time. And the quality of the work is so perfect that there are walls and there are buildings where there's no mortar between the blocks or bricks or stones, and they're simply held together in place by their own weight because they're put together so perfectly. And I'm fascinated by a lot of that stuff. I'm older than most of my students, but I sort of have a bucket list of things that I would like to see while I am still a member of this earth. And going to Machu Picchu, for example, is something I'd like to see. I'd like to see the pyramids in Egypt, or Petra in Jordan, the Great Wall of China. When I got married, I went to Italy and walked around the Colosseum in Rome and saw the Pantheon and visited the city of Pompeii. And it's great when you can look at civilizations that came before, and even when the civilization is no longer there or functioning, we can still learn a lot about what they were able to do based on what they built. And some of what they built, to be honest with you, is pretty darn impressive. So this is where a history teacher like myself depends a lot on archaeology. I'm not an archaeologist, it's not my specialty, but archaeologists are the people who, travel around the world doing, digging up artifacts and looking for things. Then you try to figure it out. And there are a lot of things that we simply don't know to this day, how some of these structures were built. And one of the great mysteries is you can look at what remains of a great civilization, and the civilization didn't survive. And we can guess, well, what was the reason? And to be honest with you, that's what we're doing. We're guessing. We really don't know. And a lot of times too, we're still learning new things where we think we know something, and then somebody digs up an artifact and it rewrites the history book. So I don't know about you. I'm interested in this stuff. I enjoy learning about it. I enjoy talking about it. Basically, the theory goes that around 15,000 years ago, more or less, I wasn't there at the time, although I feel sometimes when I'm sitting in this chair all day like I was. But more or less about 15,000 years ago, the idea goes that there was a land bridge that connected what is today Alaska, that basically connected North America to what is today Russia or Siberia. And that at some point humans migrated from that part of the world and populated the Americas. That's the general theory. Can I tell you right now that it is a guaranteed, indisputable fact that will never be updated? Probably not. Some of you may be familiar. I used to teach years ago Western civilization and world history, and they found this mummy up in the which mountains were they? They found this mummy. They call the mummy the Iceman. And they found that this mummy was so well preserved and had tools that showed that metallurgy and using different types of like copper, that, what people thought didn't match what was discovered. So, discoveries are made, which means that by the time your kids take a class like this, information that's in a book today may be updated. Things might be discovered, or technology may be developed that allows people to figure out things that we don't know. But it's not easy to try to figure out all the details of a prehistoric civilization in particular, especially if it's a civilization that did not leave a written record. Some of the civilizations we're going to talk about had writing. The ancient Maya, for example. And one of the tragedies, of course, is that when the Spanish conquered, they actually destroyed a lot of the texts and books that existed, erasing, history that we may never know. And you're correct, Mark. It was in the Alps, on the border, I believe, between Italy and Austria, where they found the Iceman. And that's a subject for a different class, but it's fascinating. So people crossed into what is today what we call North America, populated the Americas. The area that today we call Central America going into South America is sometimes referred to as Mesoamerica. And that's where some really interesting civilizations developed. Speaking for myself, when I was young and learned about the Incas and learned about Machu Picchu for the first time, I was just fascinated. It's pretty interesting stuff. And we're going to talk more about that next time. These civilizations began domesticating crops. What changes a group of people from being hunter-gatherers to being able to stay in one area and build a city and great structures is you have to have a food source that you can control. You have to be able to build somewhere where you will have access to fresh water, where you will be able to grow certain crops. And what you need to understand is, for those of you who've taken a class with me before, I like to joke about different kinds of food, because I think a great way to learn about different cultures is to sort of look at what they eat. And people in the Americas were eating things that people in Europe were not eating. Potatoes, for example, were consumed in the Americas. And I mean, there were hundreds or even more varieties of potatoes. I mean, it was amazing, really. People in Europe didn't know what potato was. Tomatoes, for example, they didn't know what they were. In fact, when Europeans came over to the New World and encountered tomatoes, they wouldn't eat them at first because they thought they might be poisonous. Squash is another example of a food item. And then, of course, there's the number one item, and that's corn, or it's also referred to as maize. And corn was in the Americas what wheat was for the Europeans. So when people in the Americas learned how to reliably grow corn and these other crops, it allowed them to establish communities. It allowed them to build cities. It allowed them to have surpluses that they could trade. And so, you know, that's important. One of the earliest cities and one of the earliest communities, I want to take a moment and talk about a group of people called the Olmecs. Olmecs. The Olmecs are considered to be the first real city builders in the Americas. And of course, I'll point out that, you know, that could change if some archaeological discovery is made down the road. But at the moment, it is generally believed among most scholars that the Olmecs are the earliest known civilization in the Americas that we are aware of at this point. They were quite artistic, and they created these heads. And I want to see if I can find. I thought I had it ready. Yeah, I want to share my screen with you and just give you an example of their art, which is just pretty darn amazing. So this here is one of the sculpture, the heads that date back to the period of the Olmecs. This is an Olmec stone head, which is, I think, pretty impressive, to be honest with you. And I have certain websites that I posted for you in the modules. Here's a city, Teotihuacan, that is considered to be the oldest city of its kind in the Americas. And you know what's really interesting, and I don't have an explanation for this. If you look at civilizations all over the world, even civilizations that did not have contact with each other, they all seem to, not all, but many seem to be interested in building these pyramid-like structures. They're very different. I mean, if you look at the pyramids in Teotihuacan, or the pyramids built by the Maya, or built by the Aztecs, they're not the same exactly as the ones built by the Egyptians, right? But still, there's this building of these structures that rise up, and It's very interesting. So one of the impressive cities is called Teotihuacan, and I'm reviewing my notes because I want to make sure I get my dates right. And apparently, according to the Aztec language, Teotihuacan means the place where the gods were created. And it's one of these cities that was built basically between the 1st and 7th centuries, over a period of several hundred years. And no one is quite sure who started construction of it. But as that city grew, it became a magnet for different groups of people in the region who had access to it. So, for example, when that city was first under construction, the Aztecs were not there, but then the Aztecs came later. And it is thought that at one time that city may have held as many as 25,000 inhabitants. And if you look, for example, at the cities built by the Aztecs, I'm going to talk more about that next time. Where Mexico City is today used to be the Aztec capital called Tenochtitlan. And I'm always afraid I'm not saying the names properly, but I hope I am. And so you can see that the Aztecs would have been exposed to or would have seen Teotihuacan and would have been influenced by it. And as I say, I have it as a goal. I mean, I really want to go and travel and see these structures for myself. It's the closest you're ever going to get to time travel. When I got married, I went to Rome, and then my wife and I took a trip to visit Pompeii. And when you're walking around the streets of a 2,000-year-old Roman city, and you're entering 2,000-year-old buildings and homes where people lived, it's an experience unlike anything else. And it really does bring history to life. So someday, when all of this coronavirus trouble is not around, and I have more time and maybe a little more money, I have a very long list of places that I would like to visit. Maybe what I should do as an activity, just for fun, is make a list of all the places that I would like to visit, and then have you see if you want to add to that list. Do you agree? Would you like to visit these places yourself? Or perhaps there are places I haven't thought of that you would recommend. That would be sort of a fun, sort of a class project we could do. So I want you to be aware of the early civilizations of Mesoamerica and the crops that they grew and the cities that they built. Here's the thing that gets weird. There are these civilizations that built these really complex cities, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. And to this day, no one quite understands the reason for that. For the Maya, excuse me, let me take a little drink. I had a carne asada burrito for lunch. Anyway, that won't be on your quiz, but it should be. The Maya were just magnificent builders. And they built this amazing civilization pretty much between the year 200 and 800. And then after that, everything just sort of fell apart. And by the time you get to the year 900, they're sort of just gone. I mean, it's not like all the people just died and, you know, were never heard from again, but the urban centers, the cities they built were more or less abandoned. And the people were sort of scattered to the wind. And to this day, nobody really knows what happened. And there are a lot of civilizations like that, where, you know, they were big, they were powerful, they were great, and then something happened, and they're gone. Now, in the case of a civilization like the Aztecs or the Inca, we know what happened to them. The Spanish came, there was a conflict, the Spanish won, and the Aztecs lost, and the Inca lost. We know that there was something that happened. There's a record of it. But, you know, the Maya, their great civilization was pretty much, you know, over and done with even before the first Europeans came here. So there's a mystery there. And it may be solved at some point in the future, or it might not be. There's a researcher at UCSD, and he's almost like a real life Indiana Jones character. In fact, I actually emailed him once to see if I could get him to come to Grossmont and do a presentation. I never even got an answer. But check this out. At UCSD, right here in San Diego, they've developed this system called LIDAR. And it's a special radar where you fly around Central America, and you fly over the jungle and over the trees. And this LIDAR has the ability to penetrate the vegetation to reveal structures that are hidden from view, buried under the vegetation, that have been forgotten. So there's this map that they've made of all these like structures and cities and stone buildings in, you know, Central America that nobody even knew about in the modern world. And now with this new technology, they're discovered. So this guy goes with his tablet or his iPad, right? And he's got all the data there, and he's got his GPS, and he's walking through the jungle. And according to the data, you know, if he walks another, you know, half a mile in a certain direction, he's going to come across a hidden, buried city. And so it shows this guy, and he's walking through the jungle, and all of a sudden, you know, here's this stone structure that is just magnificent, that he discovered with this new technology. I'm going to look and see if I can find the video. National Geographic did a special on this. It was the coolest thing. So when you're talking about prehistoric civilizations and these early civilizations, there's still so much we don't know, but I find it really interesting, especially when you have to think about how advanced these people had to be at one time in order to build these structures, in order to populate these cities. So, you know, that's pretty cool. I'm going to speak to you next time about the Aztecs and the Inca a little bit more, because these civilizations were up and running and doing pretty well at the time the Spanish came, and then there was a confrontation and the Spanish won. But before European contact, there were many civilizations, and we know a little bit about them, and there's still a lot that we don't know. In the area around modern day New Mexico and Arizona, there were the Mogollon, and I'm always afraid I'm saying the names wrong, Hohokam or Hohokam people, and they developed their own systems of irrigation so that they could survive. And some of them developed really impressive masonry structures. These are sort of there's a group further north called the Anasazi people, and they are their ancestors. They're the ancestors of the Pueblo American Indians in what is now sort of Colorado and Utah and going into Arizona. They grew corn and beans and squash, and they built these amazing structures. They almost look like apartment buildings they built, and they built them sort of like underneath where cliffs were to provide shelter from the heat and to provide protection. And it's the coolest thing, but this is another case where these people built these magnificent structures, and then all of a sudden, for reasons unknown, they're not there anymore and nobody knows what happened to them. And I want to look real quick, and I want to share with you what these buildings look like. So it's kind of cool in a way, and it's a mystery. It's a mystery when you have these structures that are built and no one knows. Let me see if I can find, I thought I had another picture. This is just text. I have this web page put on your in Canvas. Let me try this. And they built these structures, and they're basically like apartment buildings that they built, hidden like underneath cliffs. And they're just simply known as cliff dwellings. And it's pretty amazing how they built them in a dry climate. And they're pretty, I mean, pretty advanced engineering, frankly. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're gone. And this is another case where nobody knows, you know, what happened to these people. And when you look at these civilizations where people built these great structures and then they disappeared, was it infectious disease? Was it a plague? Was it war? Was it drought? Was it famine? Was it all of the above? Nobody knows. What really fascinates me in North America prior to European contact are groups that are known as the Mississippian Indians or Mississippian Native Americans or indigenous people. And most of you probably do not know that in the area near the Mississippi River, near St. Louis, but it's on the Illinois side, there are these huge mounds. They're basically pyramids in a way, but they're made of dirt and gravel. And they built this magnificent city. And you had a lot of people living there between, let's say, the year 600, you know, going up to, you know, say 1300. And then by the time we get to 1400, the evidence suggests that this area was deserted. So this is another example of, you know, these people building this magnificent city, this advanced civilization, and then all of a sudden they're gone. These mounds that they built, they're known as the Cahokia Mounds. And there's a site that remains. It's about 5 square miles. And it's in Illinois, but right near the border with Missouri. And it's pretty amazing. And I just wanted to give you a little sample of this. So I am going to share my screen again just for a moment, because this is just so cool. And they built these mounds. And I may try to show you just for a minute. They have like a little 2-minute video, so I may show you this. And it's on my list of places to see, for sure. So I don't know about you, but like, I think stuff like that is pretty cool. And it's here in the United States, right near, not far from St. Louis, on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. And all of those mounds were built, they're man-made, they're not natural. And they built like these huge mounds and these huge plateaus with, and then they would put, you know, the people who were the ruling class or the elite would live on top. And I think it's pretty cool, actually. There's a video I have about this that goes into more detail that I posted in the modules. And if you get a chance, you might want to watch it. And I think this stuff is interesting. And again, though, here's another example where, you know, people have studied this. And right around the time 1400, that area was deserted. No one knows why. Was there a war? Was there a plague? Was there a famine? You know, so you have these different civilizations that built these magnificent communities, and then they just sort of, one day they're just not there anymore. But so I have a list, I say, on my list of places I'd like to go. It would certainly be worth a day if I were in that part of the country to visit that site. And you know, I might have a heart attack trying to walk up the stairs to get to the top of the thing, but at least I would die in a historically important place. So I went with my family to Sequoia National Park, and there's this viewing area where you have to climb up to the top, and it's called Morro Rock. And I decided that I was going to look at the view from the top of there. And I thought that the question was, will I be alive to make it to the top? And I managed to do it without having a heart attack. It was very impressive. So I have a video about the civilization that built those mounds, and I'd like you to watch it. You know, it's like a 10 or 15 minute video, but it's worth your time. I think you'll find it interesting. Here's something that we're going to talk about more next time. And here's a question. When the Europeans came over to the New World, how were they able to conquer it so quickly? I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, the Aztecs. I mean, the Aztecs were people that you did not mess with. I mean, they're like the Spartans, you know? I mean, the Aztecs were a warrior culture. And then, you know, Cortez shows up with a group of Spaniards and some American Indian allies that he made along the way, but he takes the Aztecs down. And one of the reasons, as Marco pointed out to me in the chat, is infectious disease. And this is where what we're dealing with now with the coronavirus is really something that needs to make you stop and think. Europeans domesticated large animals and in larger numbers. So Europeans by this point had domesticated horses and cattle and pigs and goats and sheep and, the rest of, what you consider your, standard farm animals. In the case of civilizations in the Americas, the only large animal that they domesticated that we are aware of is the llama or the alpaca, which is basically like a llama. But they didn't have these large farm animals that they domesticated with and interacted with in the same way that the Europeans did. So what scientists think is, here's the deal. A lot of the infectious diseases that make us sick or kill us or make us vulnerable occur in humans when they are transferred from animals to people, right? For example, they talked about the swine flu, which is a flu virus that originated from, from pigs, basically. Or the chicken, the bird flu and things of that nature. And there's always a fear of viruses or bacterial infections or other illnesses that affect animals. And then what happens when those viruses mutate and then all of a sudden become a danger to humans? The coronavirus, for example, is called the novel coronavirus because it's a new virus in the human population, right? Before this outbreak, there are other coronaviruses. The common cold, for example, is a version of a corona-type virus, but this one was new. And the reason everybody's so freaked out about it is that as a new virus, that means that we do not have any pre-existing immunity to it, right? So the theory goes that because Europeans had more exposure to large domesticated animals, they were exposed to a variety of infectious diseases that people in the Americas were not exposed to. So that when Europeans came over and they brought with them some of the influenza viruses or smallpox, for example, or even different types of, even tuberculosis, it wiped out these native people and made it basically impossible for them to really resist this European colonization. Because if they weren't going to be killed by European guns, they were going to die from a European disease to which they had no immunity. You understand what I'm saying here? So when you look at a civilization that doesn't make it or that is destroyed or conquered, it's not just about weapons technology. Do not underestimate the danger and the power of infectious disease. When you introduce a virus or a bacteria to a human population that has no immunity to it, the impact of that is absolutely devastating. And I have a lot of historians who would agree with me that the reason why Europeans were able to conquer the New World so quickly is that even if they had fewer people, yeah, the guns made a big difference, but it was the spread of infectious disease that was really the main factor. And it makes sense. And there's a book I would like to recommend to you. And the book is called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And what that book does is it looks at history through the lens of weapons technology, metallurgy, technological advancement, and infectious disease. So basically, no matter how advanced your civilization is, no matter how strong you think you are, if your population is exposed to a deadly infectious disease, no matter how strong you think you are going to be brought down. You're going to be brought to your knees. And that's basically what happened to the mighty Aztec Empire. I mean, they were feared throughout what is today modern day Mexico. I mean, they were it. They were feared. They were the ultimate power. And yet, within a short time after meeting the Spanish, you know, they fell. And it's not just the weapons. So I think one of the great lessons for our time that we are experiencing now is do not underestimate what infectious disease can do. And think about the chain of events. Right now, because of coronavirus, a lot of people aren't working or they've lost their job, right? So it's a cascading effect. So you introduce a dangerous infectious disease, right? Then it causes economic damage. Then it leads to social unrest. All these things are connected to each other, right? So if you look at civilizations like, you know, the Maya, for example, or the civilization that built these great mounds, and you look at these civilizations where all of a sudden the people are just gone. The people who were these, built these dwellings, these apartment-like structures, living, in under the cliffs, and they built these wonderful structures, and then all of a sudden they disappear. So what you have to understand is that all this stuff is connected: infectious disease, war, economic collapse, social unrest. Once you introduce one of these factors into a civilization, it leads to others. For example, I used to teach Western civilization, and I used to teach about the ancient Greeks. And one of the things that took down the ancient Athenians when they went to war against the Spartans is they thought they'd be safe behind their city walls. Well, they went and hid behind their city walls, and then an infectious disease outbreak happened, and people in the city started to die of plague. And it weakened the whole population. So all these things have a cascading effect, is what I'm trying to tell you. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, but we're just as vulnerable to these threats as anybody. I mean, we have the technology today to better understand it. We can try to come up with vaccines and medical treatment and all the rest. But look at what this virus, you can't even see a virus with a regular microscope. And look at what this virus has done, not only to this country, but to the world. All right? We're afraid to leave our homes. We have to wear a mask to go out in public. People have lost their jobs. It's affected the economy. There's social unrest. All of this caused by something that you can't even see with a microscope. So when you think about it like that, it's not hard to imagine that maybe something like that happened to some of these prehistoric or ancient civilizations. So it's something to think about. I am going to be posting additional material. I am not going to set any firm due dates yet for online quizzes or the discussion board, because I'm still adding students to the class, and I want to give people a chance to get settled in and get their book and do their reading and all the rest. But as we move forward and we end up going into week 3 and week 4, you are going to have regular assignments to do. You're going to have questions on the discussion board. You're going to have online quizzes. And then you're going to, before you know it, you'll be getting ready for a midterm. So if you don't have a book, please make sure you order one right away. And I'm going to post additional invitations for you to join my online lecture. If you can make it, that's great. If you can't make it, you can watch it later. And that's how I'm going to do this. And again, please be patient with me if it takes a little while to get you into the class, but I have to make sure that I don't have someone in my Zoom lecture who is not supposed to be here trying to make trouble. So, just I want to be understanding with my students, but I need you to be understanding with me as well. And if there's something going on, then feel free to contact me and I'll get back to you. So I'm going to stop the recording.